Jaya Radha Madhavu Kundi Jaya Radha Madhavu Kunya Vivati His Divine Grace. Abhaya Charana Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananda Goti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Parem Se Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Radha Nityananda Shivaya Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopagopata Sayam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavanam ki jai. Mathuram ki jai. Navadiptam ki jai. Jayadavasami ki jai. Yamunamai ki jai. Shrimati Lasadevi ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrindi ki jai. Gaur Premananda. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru Gauranga Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premananda. So, today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th Canto, 10th chapter, text 20. Also, we'd like to welcome the devotees who are joining us on the internet. Let's see, 3 here. Chopra Ashok, Praneshwar from Delhi, and Sumit Bharta from Sacramento. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevi Vaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevi Vaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sa Vai Vava Loka Anirikshanartam Avyakta Lingo Vicharati Api Svit Yogeshwaranam Gatim Anda Bulihi Katam Vichakshita Rahanubandaha Savaivavanloka Nirikshanartam Yaktalingo Vicharatya Pisvit Yogeshwaranam Gatimanda Buddhi Akatham Vichakshita Grihanubandha Savaivavanloka Nirikshanartam Yaktalingo Vicharatya Pisvit Yogeshwaranam Gatimanda Buddhi Akatham Vichakshita Grihanubandha Savaivavanloka Nirikshanartam Yaktalingo Vicharatya Pisvit Yogeshwaranam Gatimanda Buddhi Akatham Vichakshita Grihanubandha. Okay.
Savaivavanloka Nirikshanartam
Savaivavanloka Nirikshanartam
Avyaktalingo Vicharatya Pisvit
Avyaktalingo Vicharatya Pisvit
Yogeshwaranam Gatimanda Buddhi
Yogeshwaranam Gatimanda Buddhi
Katham Vichakshita Grihanubandha
Katham Vichakshita Grihanubandha. Anyone else? Lady?
Savaivavanloka Nirikshanartham Avyaktalingo Vicharatya Pisvit
Avyaktalingo Vicharatya Pisvit
Yogeshwaranam Gatimanda Buddhi
Yogeshwaranam Gatimanda Buddhi
Katham Vichakshita Grihanubandha
Katham Vichakshita Grihanubandha. Savaivavanloka Nirikshanartham nirikshanartam avyaktalingo vicharatya visvet Yogeshwaranam gatimandabhuti Katham vichakshita grahanubandaha. Okay. Saha, that Supreme Personality of Godhead.
The Supreme Personality of God.
Or his incarnation Kapila Deva.
Or his incarnation Kapila Deva.
Thy, indeed. Bhavan, your good self.
The good self.
Loka nirikshana artam. Just to study the characteristics of the people of this world. Avyaktalingaha, without manifesting your real identity. Vichadati, are traveling in this world. Apisvit, whether. Yoga Ishvaranam, of all the advanced yogis. Gatim, the characteristics or actual behavior. Annabuddhi, who are illusioned and have become blind to spiritual knowledge. Katam, how. Vichakshita, may know. Griha anubandha, griha anubandha, sorry. I who am bound by attachment to family life or worldly life. So translation, is it not a fact that your good self is the direct representative of Kapila Deva, the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? To examine people and see who is actually a human being and who is not. You have presented yourself to be a deaf and dumb person. Are you not moving this way upon the surface of the world? I am very attached to family life and worldly activities, and I am blind to spiritual knowledge. Nonetheless, I am now present before you and am seeking enlightenment from you. How could I advance the spiritual life? So, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Although Maharaj Rahugana was playing the part of a king, he had been informed by Jadabharta that he was not a king, nor was Jadabharta deaf and dumb. Such designations were simply coverings of the spirit soul. Everyone must come to this knowledge, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter, text 13. Dehinosmin yata dehaye. Everyone is encased within the body. Since the body is never identical with the soul, the bodily activities are simply illusory. In the association of such a sadhu as Jadabharta, Maharaj Rahugana came to the awareness that his activities as a royal authority were simply illusory phenomena. He therefore agreed to receive knowledge from Jadabharta, and that was the beginning of his perfection. Tadviganartam sarvameva amigachet, a person like Maharaj Rahugana, who was very inquisitive to know the value of life and the spiritual science, must approach a personality like Jadabharta. Tasmat gurun prapadyeta giyasu sheya uttamam. That's from the Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 3rd chapter, text 21. One must approach a guru like Jadabharta, a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to inquire about the goal of human life. So, favourable Lautoka nirikshanartam avyaktalingo vicharatya pisvet Yogeshwaranam gatimandabhuti Katham vichakshita Grihanubandha. So Om Ganat Sigadandasha Yananjana Shlakaya Chakshuram Veditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, of course, Jadabharata has inspired Maharaj Rahuganath to become humble. Like humility is actually the first quality in spiritual advancement. As we hear from Queen Kunti, Janmai Shvarya Shutasha Shivir Enamana Adapuma, that generally we're very attached to different things. We're very attached to our good birth, just like here in Fiji, if you have to be born in a Sharma family or a Basram family, gold merchant. So anyway, so if you happen to be born in a certain family, you're very attached to your family and your good birth. Even the religion that I was born into, or the culture that I was born into, we were taught that we were the chosen people, the Jewish religion. That only people who were born into this particular religion or into this particular culture could go back to Godhead. It's a very interesting conception. And actually, you're only considered born into this particular culture or religion if your mother happened to be Jewish. If your father was Jewish, it didn't work. So it's called a matriarchal succession. So the other opposite is patriarchal succession. Do you understand? There's matriarchal and patriarchal. So anyway, because I was in the proper matriarchal succession, I was going back to Godhead. So, interesting. So one becomes very proud of his birth, the family. That's Janma. And then Aishvarya, one becomes very proud of his money, of his opulence. Aishvarya means opulence. I mean, it's like even a practical example. Thinking that I was going to get an inheritance. You know, my father, he was a very rich man. Actually, the only thing he left me was a gun. No money. So, as I was thinking, I was on the way to the funeral, I was thinking that I was going to get a large inheritance. I was thinking, now everyone in the Hare Krishna movement will listen to me because I'll be rich. Just like, I mean, it happens like that. Just like when I was in Mayapur one year, this nice devotee, Ambarish, who is the grandson or great-grandson of Henry Ford, was coming, and he was supporting or paying for the whole Temple of Vedic Planetarium, right? Tens of millions of dollars. So he was received by elephants. You know, we had a whole... There was no guru in ISKCON ever been received like that before. Even Prabhupada didn't receive him like that. They had like conch shells at the gate, elephants at the gate, announcements from the loudspeakers, you know, the siren was going off, and he walks in. So that's wealth. Of course, he's humble. He's a nice, humble devotee. So one gets bewildered by this wealth. And we were just speaking about one particular wealthy man in India. I'm not going to mention his name. In Delhi, and he just treats people really badly. And I've seen sometimes in India, when people have money, in many cases they are hiring servants, you know, underage children basically, to act as servants, and they treat them like dogs. Literally, I mean, I've been visiting people's homes, and I just say, what are you treating that person like that for? It's a living entity. It's a spirit soul. Just like the story here of King Rahugana. He engaged these men in carrying his palanquin. And they were carrying the palanquin. And of course, Jadbharat, being a great devotee of the Lord, didn't want to step on any of the animals, particularly the ants. And he was basically jumping around. The palanquin was shaking from side to side. and the king just chastised him like he was a dog, right? You see that sometimes. I mean, in India, in one sense it's even more prominent in India, that the so-called higher class people, not really higher class, because higher class means Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmani Gavihashtani Shuni Chaiva Swapake Cha Pandita Samadarshana. That's higher class. To see all living entities, dog eater, Brahman, anybody, equally. Pandita Samadarshanaha. That means the Pandit sees all creatures equally, regardless of the body. But sometimes you see in India, the so-called higher class, they're treating people like dogs. And Maharaj Rahugana was doing that to Jadbharata too. And then Jadbharata started to speak some philosophical information. So anyways, that's Aishvarya, Janma Aishvarya. And then Shrutasya. If one is very learned, you also become very proud and look down upon people. Oh, those uneducated people. I have a PhD or MA or something like that. And anyway, so, and even we've seen in the movement, sometimes devotees are very intelligent. They just look down upon the other devotees. That happens, even as spiritualists. So, Janmaishwarya, Shrutasya, and then Shribir. Shribir means beauty. Like if someone is very beautiful or handsome, they become very proud. You see that. Even if they're the biggest malachia, you see that in the Hollywood stars, Bollywood stars, isn't it? They're very proud because they have some physical beauty, which even according to Vedic standards is not physical beauty. It's like animal beauty. According to Vedic standards, physical beauty is to have eyes that are like lotus petals, and hands, we mentioned this the other day, hands that go down to the knees, and nice nose. Nowadays, of course, people to have a semblance of this physical beauty have to go to plastic surgeons. You know plastic surgeons? That means they alter. When I was young, another story when I was young, because of the heritage that I was brought up into, usually the girls had big noses. And a big nose is not considered a sign of beauty. You know that? Like in India, if someone has a big nose, you just stay away from it. So, at the age of 11 or 12, all the girls would disappear for about 2 months while they had a nose job. You understand? The nose was made nice and cute. So, that's street beer. So, even beauty or handsomeness can be a detriment. Like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he was very worried about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because Lord Chaitanya was young. Lord Chaitanya was attractive. So he said, how is he going to be able to maintain his sannyas status, right? And so he decided to teach Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu about Vedanta Sutra. And of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ultimately ended up teaching Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya about the true meaning of the Vedanta Sutra. So, in any case, these are the things that really interfere or attachment to these things. It's not that you have to be ugly to be Krishna conscious, although it's helpful. Janma Aishwarya, Shrutasya, Shribir. And of course, in many cases, Krishna does things that take these things away. Was it? Yashaham Anuvrinami, Harishye Tadram Shanai. I mean, like I may have given the example that I never got the inheritance from my father. I said he gave me a gun. I wasn't supposed to shoot myself with it, but anyway, in America everyone has guns. It's not an uncommon thing. So Krishna didn't allow that because it would have been an impediment in my spiritual life. So Yashyaham Anugranami Harishye Tadranam Shanai. For those who I especially favor, I take away everything. So I don't want Krishna to especially favor me right now. Actually, I do, but don't take away everything. I take away everything, and then his friends and relatives desert him. This is the actual translation of the verse. And they say, well, he's just a crazy guy, and all you're left with is the shelter of Krishna. And that happens sometimes. We were talking to Nanda Kishore yesterday, that when things get really difficult in the movement and you realize your intelligence can't really solve a problem, you don't have the facility, the faculties, or whatever to solve a particular problem, then what do? You go to Krishna. Like you see, when the demigods have a problem, generally, if everything's going all right, they do not go to Krishna, even though they're devotees. One time, Indra was sitting there, very happy with his assembly. His wife, Sachi, was sitting next to him or on his lap or something. And he even ignored his spiritual master who came in. Brahaspati came in. That's the spiritual master of the demigods. And then Brahaspati understood that his disciple committed offense, and then he disappeared, and the demigods lost all opulence. Then they had to approach Krishna. So, can you imagine, let's say, if you were sitting here, and for those of you who are initiated by Srila Gurudev, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, you just kept sitting when he walked in, what would happen? The flame would come out, right? You'd be burnt to death by the flames of his anger, right? So Brahaspati did something different. He just left. Whereas sometimes it's more merciful to yell and scream at someone, because anyway you correct them right away rather than letting them lose all their opulence. So that's actually more merciful. So Gurudev was more merciful, like that. So yeah, sometimes mercy, sometimes humility means to chastise someone. And if you let something go, if you let something in the mode of ignorance go, some Vaishnava aparada go, you're responsible for it too. If you see something ignorant, for example, let's say if I'm walking through the temple here, and I see garbage on the floor, and I just say, well, it's not my service. That you're responsible. So sometimes the guru or authority has to chastise to correct the disciple. Several things get better with beating, disciples and dogs. And of course, I'm not so adept at beating disciples, so I use sarcasm and stuff. Different sarcasm and humor. So anyway, Yashahamanagrami Horishe Tadganam Shanai. So Krishna takes away everything, and then ultimately you have to say, Krishna, help! Help! Like Lord Brahma and the demigods, they go to the shore of the ocean of milk. Krishna, help! Because they tried everything else, and it didn't work. So it's like us too. We try everything else. Help! Nrsingadev, help! Krishna, help! And then Krishna helps at that point. But sometimes he won't help until you come to that point, to bring you to that point. You understand? And that point is the point of humility. Because before you're thinking, I can take care of it myself. And so you see this exhibition of humility in many great devotees who are seeking the shelter and help of Krishna. I was thinking of this humility in regard to the pastimes of Rupa and Sanatana Goswami. Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, just to fill you in, were working for the Nawab Hussain Shah. And not only were they working for him, they were wealthy, they were intelligent, and they were attractive. They had all those, Janmaishwarya, Shridhasya, Shivya. They had all those things. When they retired, when Rupa Goswami retired, there were boatloads of gold coins. Just like yesterday, we visited a gold mart here in Lautoka. One of our Sony friends. So anyway, we visited. So can you imagine a boatload of gold coins? Boatloads, not just one. Many boatloads of gold coins. Pretty nice. They in the estimation of today's money, they would be billionaires or millionaires at least. Really rich personalities. And they were so intelligent. Even before coming to Lord Chaitanya's movement, they had written books, they'd studied the Bhagavatam, they knew so many different languages, Persian, Urdu. I don't know if they knew Hindi, but they probably did. Urdu was very similar. So, and imagine Persian, that's like the Iranian language. And of course Sanskrit, of course Bengali, probably Oriya, they understood too. So they had all these languages, very intelligent, brilliant people. And yet when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu approached, what did they do? They put a straw in their teeth. That's a sign of humility. And they said, people say that we're very intelligent, but we don't know anything. What's the goal of life? It's a very similar expression to what we find here. What's the goal of life? And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so taken means he was so impressed by their humility, he basically initiated them right on the spot. They didn't have to take the ISKCON disciple course or go through any recommendation or anything like that. He actually said to them that you two are my eternal servants life after life. It's an interesting statement from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And your humility is just paining me, in other words, attracting him, not giving him pain, so to speak, but attracting him. And then he said, Sanatana and Rupa. He gave them actual names at that point. That was in Ramakeli, where they were serving the Nuwabu Shah. And so eventually, of course, they got liberated for that particular position. So Krishna brings us to that point of abject humility, of understanding, as mentioned here, that we are none of these designations. We were talking about this last night, about the designation of being a guru. Remember that discussion last night? People asked, of course, Lena asked, how can you not think of yourself, I'm just paraphrasing, how do you think of yourself if you don't think of yourself as a guru? Well, you think of yourself in terms of doing a particular service. I'm a servant. Gopi Bharata Padakamala Dasa, 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 Nudasa. I mean, that's really the consciousness. And if you think anything else, you're thinking in terms of the temporary designation, upadi. Upadi means designation, temporary label. Sarvapadi vinir muktam tat purataina nirmalam. Haribo. Krishna Kena Vishkesha Sevanam. Bhakti Uchate. So we have to get rid of these upadis, but you can't get rid of the upadi just by getting rid of it. You can't say, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this body. I mean, we're not the body, it's true. But if you simply try to do a negation, it doesn't work. I'm not this. That's neti, the process of neti. Not this, not that, not that. And so eventually you become a Maya body. I'm not anything. And eventually you become depressed. I'm hopeless, I'm useless, I'm not anything. So you got to do the positive. The positive is that I'm spirit, soul, part and parcel of Krishna. I'm eternal servant of Krishna, servant of my spiritual master. And you take up that positive identification, and then you arrive at the point that the Bhagavad Gita states in the 5th chapter, I believe, 8th to 9th text. You remember those verses? No. Good. I got some verses you don't know. 5th chapter, 8th to 9th verses. Good. Good, I got some verses he doesn't know. So, no, I know the verse. I mean, I don't know the Sanskrit. That the liberated soul sees while the body is engaged in sitting, eating, evacuating, everything, that he does nothing. In other words, he is willing the body to do something, but he doesn't identify with those particular actions. He doesn't think, I'm sitting, I'm eating, I'm sleeping, I'm evacuating. He sees that just this machine, it's just like one drives a car. You change the oil in the car, you change the petrol in the car. I mean, not change it, but you put in petrol in the car. You don't think, I'm drinking petrol. That'd be pretty stupid, yeah. What's for breakfast this morning? Petrol. My tires hurt today. So that state only arises when you have that spiritual identification. And the spiritual identification grows from the point of I'm a servant to something very specific as one cultivates humility. It grows to something very specific in terms of your spiritual identity, the identity in the spiritual world. Because each and every one of us has a specific identity. We're servants, or at least passive worshippers, or we're friends of Krishna, or parents of Krishna, or conjugal love, conjugal lovers of Krishna. So this is actually the goal of Krishna consciousness, to realize who we are. And then when you realize who you are, then internally you have this relationship with Krishna going on. So what happens externally, whether you get sick, whether you get old, whether people blaspheme you, it doesn't really matter. Of course, you're compassionate, you want people to come to Krishna consciousness, but the other things are just like, Hare Krishna. He who praises me is my enemy, he who criticizes me is my friend. I got a lot of friends. So anyway, so this is the goal of Krishna consciousness, and then what we should be aspiring for. Not simply what we're not, but what we are. And the way to do that is to humbly approach the Guru, as mentioned here. Tasmad Guru Prapadeta Giyashu Shre Uttamam. If you want to understand these things, you have to approach the Guru. And Tadviganartha Saguru Eva Vigachet, that's in the imperative in Sanskrit. You must do. There's no alternative. And then Tadvini Pranivatena Pariprashnena. Inquire submissively, render service, and render, let's say, favorable service. The Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu states, Anyabhilashta Shunyam Jnana Karma Navatam Anukulyena Krishnana Shilanam Bhakti, that one must render service in according to what Krishna wants. You have to be active at it, and you have to do it with a nice mood. Not that Gurudev asked me to do this, I'm going to do it, but this is miserable. Yeah. It's like pulling teeth, like you have to go to the dentist. Yeah, I have to go to the dentist, so I have to go to Gurudev. Going to Gurudev is like going to the dentist. So, it shouldn't be that mood. It shouldn't be that mood. Actually, we find in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, chastised Sanatana Goswami one time. And there was another devotee, Jagadananda Pandit, who wasn't chastised. And what happened is that the devotee, no, it wasn't Jagadananda Pandit, it was another devotee. Anyway, so I forget the name of the devotee. But in any case, there was one devotee who wasn't chastised, and the one devotee who was chastised. And then your giving indicates a very intimate relationship. I don't get chastisement from you. That indicates a more distant relationship. So anyway, so the Guru chastises, guides the disciple, and the disciple should accept this all this happily. This is for my benefit. And sometimes it's hard to understand, just like when we were young. when we were young, our parents chastised us for our own benefit, and we didn't appreciate it. My mother sometimes would say, I'm chastising you because I love you. And I said, don't love me so much. Love me less. So the Guru loves and he chastises. And here you find Jadabharta chastising Maharaj Rahugana to wake him up. Wake up. Chijaga. So, any questions or comments? We got 4 more minutes. Questions, comments by anybody online? Got a lot of people watching this morning. Radhaturna, Lilavasini, Jayanti, Vrindavandasi, Divya, Nita, Leela. Yeah.
And the mood. Our moods many times get influenced by the circumstances.
Yes.
The circumstances are sometimes naturally there.
Yeah.
So, how does a person on that level, who may not be on a very high level, develop the right kind of mood?
That's actually a good question. It's very hard to develop the right type of mood. Actually, let's analyze the word mood. Mood and the word mode are very similar. So unfortunately, we're influenced by the modes of nature. So when we do get chastised or corrected, then we naturally fall into either passion or ignorance. So it is a real problem, it is a real challenge. So what I suggest is that when we get some instruction that, let's say, puts us in the wrong, or stimulates the wrong mood, we take some time out to think about it. We don't respond immediately. I think that's the best way to respond or to have the right mood. Because sometimes things get so heavy that you're just like, I can't take it anymore. So instead of responding and saying, I can't take it anymore, you're always yelling at me, take a break, time out. Chant Hare Krishna a few rounds, think about it, and come back. Actually, the story that I want to tell, I just remember the personalities. It was Jagadananda Pandit and Sanatana Goswami. Jagadananda Pandit was chastised by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because he had given advice to Sanatana Goswami. He said, Lord Chaitanya said, Jaga is just a young boy. What business does he have advising you, Sanatana Goswami? And Sanatana Goswami says, now I can understand how intimate a relationship you have with Jagadananda Pandit. And that you're making me drink the bitter nimber fruit of your praise. In other words, Lord Chaitanya was praising Sanatana Goswami, chastising Jagadananda Pandit. So we should always welcome chastisement, correction. Without correction, we don't get better, do we? No. We don't get better. We have to be corrected. We have to be guided. We have to be sometimes chastised. And Krishna does that sometimes to us too. So anyway, so to answer your question, you do a time out. You just think about it. What does Krishna want? How can I apply this instruction properly? And then you come back the next day. And you say, thank you, Gurudev.
But that may be very hard for someone to do.
Yeah.
It's like the immediate impulsive response.
Yes. And so we have to control the immediate response. I mean, that's the most difficult thing. Because there is practically an autonomic, that means immediate, involuntary response to stimuli. Just like if I hit you on, the doctor sometimes they hit you on the knee to see if your reflexes work. So if someone chastises you, immediately you want to fight back. So you have to learn enough self-control to take a walk and say, Gurudev, I want to think about this. You definitely don't want to yell back at you. It would be counterproductive. because many times he can yell louder. And anyway, he's representing Krishna. You have to always remember, one has to maintain a mood of reverence with the Guru. At the same time, the Guru, as described by Raghunath Das Goswami, is considered one's friend. It's interesting. You got these two descriptions. One's friend and also one's master. So what he does is for your benefit. That's a real friend. A real friend doesn't let the other friend get into trouble. He protects him, right? That's a friend. So the Guru should be seen as a friend. As Raghunath Das Goswami makes that very clear, I think, in the first or second verse of the Manak Shiksha.
Same thing with the Krishna and Arjuna.
Yeah.
Guru and friend.
Guru and friend. Yeah, that's true. So, that's the stereotypical relationship. That the Guru is the friend. Of course, Krishna and Arjuna, they would do. I think that's a little too much for us, but there is a mixture. Imagine, the Guru is on his bed and you just sit down and put your arm around him. Hey, Gurudev, how you doing, buddy? What would happen if you did that with Gurudev? Boom! No, you wouldn't punch you that way. So, but Krishna and Arjuna was like that. They're on the same bed. They sleep on the same bed as friends. That's a very nice thing in India. You have really deep friendships sometimes between people of the same sex. It's nothing wrong with it. They're just friends. They're buddies. In the West, you don't have that sort of deep friendship that you have in India. I mean, there's many positive things like that. Okay. Oh, there's a question. Gurudev, can you kindly answer me how not to be sentimental on Guru, but to have strong faith and trust in the Guru? That's a question. Question I'm getting online from Divya Vitai Leela is, can you kindly answer how to be not sentimental as far as the relationship with the Guru, but have a strong faith and trust in the Guru? Well, sentimental basically means that one's attached to the Vapu, the form of the Guru, and not the instructions of the Guru. So, and then, as I mentioned the other day, that we used to be like that with Prabhupada. And we were chasing Prabhupada all over America, from one end to the other. And Prabhupada eventually said to myself and Hrinananda Maharaj, don't you understand? You're not supposed to enjoy the spiritual master. You're supposed to serve the spiritual master. So immediately we ran off and started preaching. And that pleased Prabhupada. And the first devotee we made while we were preaching was Bhakti Vidyapurna Maharaj. So if Prabhupada hadn't chastised us, he would have been a devotee anyway. And there's a whole story how we made Bhakti Vidyapurna Maharaj a devotee. He was actually only 17 years of age, so we had to basically grab him away from his parents. There's a whole interesting story which I'm not going to tell in class. And we had to escape, basically, with him. But that's another story. So Prabhupada made that point. We serve the words of the spiritual master. Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Jap. Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Kodiyakya. That's actually the service to the spiritual master. That's simply one. And even there's a story of one servant of Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada sent him away to preach in Russia, which at that time was not open. And the servant was crying. And Prabhupada said to the servant, you were simply sitting here rotting, basically. Because he was serving, he wasn't just rotting. So go out and preach. So it's interesting. Interesting how Prabhupada dealt with people. So one has to just meditate on the words of the spiritual master. And even Prabhupada, when Prabhupada saw his spiritual master physically maybe a handful of times, externally a handful of times, but he was always meditating. The reason Prabhupada was able to accomplish what he did is he was always meditating on the order of his spiritual master to preach in the Western world and preach in English. So that answers that question. Another question? Yeah, I think that's it. Radha Turn is asking the question. Very nicely, but you don't get familiar. Yeah, don't get too familiar with the Guru. But he's your friend. He's actually your best friend. Okay, and also Krishna's your best friend. Bhaktaram Jagadathasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suridam Sarvabhutanam Gyatva Mam Shanti Richati. So we have to end now. It's time to greet the deities. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.